We're just going to have fun and yeah, and as the audience joins, you can wave, say hello. I believe everyone can write in the chat, so feel free to write to the audience.
Oh.
We're just going to give it a couple of seconds, and Ed will let us know.
A little bit more. That's right. And we're trickling in. And why don't you go ahead and start, Grace?
Thank you, Ed. And hello, everyone. Welcome to another book chat at University Bookstore, part of their virtual Reading Aloud program, which you can check out on uBookstore's YouTube channel. My name is Grace, and I am the former events producer here at University Bookstore. I helped set this event up, and I love cozy mysteries, and I love cozy mystery panels, which this one is so much that I insisted that I should come back and moderate this one. So that's why I'm here. And I have the pleasure today of chatting with these fabulous Kensington Books Cozy Mysteries authors. As I say your name, if you want to hold up your books to the audience, Debra H. Goldstein, Barbara Ross, Lee Hollis, Darci Hannah, and Cheryl Holland. Thank you to you, our audience, for joining us for a night of suspense and fun. And as I mentioned in the green room, hopefully some embarrassing questions. We would love to hear from you where you're zooming in from. There may have been something wrong with the chat during the last event. So if you're not able to communicate with us using the chat, please add your comments and remarks to the Q&A field at the bottom of your screens, and we'll take a look at that too. So we would love to hear from where you're zooming in from, whether you've read any of these books, what book is next on your TBR list. So just let us know. University Bookstore is the oldest independent bookstore in the region. In fact, they're celebrating their 122nd anniversary this year. You can read more about the books and the authors using the link in the chat. So I'll keep this intro brief so we can get to the discussion sooner. Debra is the author of the Sarah Blair Mysteries, as well as Should Have Played Poker and Maize in Blue. An active Birmingham, Alabama civic volunteer, Debra also serves on the national boards of Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America. Darci Hannah is a lifelong lover of the Great Lakes, a natural wonder that inspires many of her stories. When Darci isn't baking for family and friends, hiking with her furry pals, or concocting her next cozy mystery, she can be found wandering around picturesque lakeside villages with her hubby, sampling baked goods and breaking for coffee more than she should. You're drinking coffee right now, aren't you?
Well, I had to put it away. Can't be jittery. Yes, I just had some.
Staying on brand. Cheryl now writes full-time after she left an engineering career designing and building military flight simulators in amazing countries all over the world. Fulfilling the dream of a lifetime, she combines her love of writing with a passion for oil painting and creating glass art. Lee Hollis is the pen name of a brother and sister writing team. We have a Rick Kopp here, who's a veteran Hollywood writer, producer, and also the author of 3 other mystery series under his own name and under Lee Hollis. Holly Simison is an award-winning food and cocktails columnist who lives in North Carolina. And Barbara Ross is the author of the Maine Clam Bake Mysteries and the Jane Darrowfield Mysteries. Her books have been nominated for multiple Agatha Awards for Best Contemporary Novel and have won the Maine Literary Award for Crime Fiction. And if you want to read more, because there is way more I could talk about for all of these wonderful authors, take a look at that link. Be sure to follow them on social media as well. And a few announcements before we start. This event is being recorded for later playback on our YouTube channel. And after the discussion portion, there's plenty of time for audience Q&A, so please put your audience questions in the Q&A field at the bottom of your Zoom screens at any time, and we'll get to them at the end. So thank you to all of our authors for joining us today. Do you want to just start by quickly telling the audience where you're zooming in from today? I'll start with Debra.
Well, today I'm normally from Birmingham, Alabama, but today I'm zooming in from Hilton Head. Yeah, I'm playing grandma for a few days, and if you hear a cry, it means a 7-week-old woke up. Everybody else is out at the fireworks.
And how about you, Darci?
I am coming in from Michigan, from Howell, Michigan. I have a dog growling in the background here. You hear something somewhere. So if I scoot up and leave, I'm just kicking him out. So
very mysterious. Can you tell us a little bit about your really fun background there?
Oh yeah. So I wish I have my other books on there too, but I don't know if I don't know. I didn't dial in correctly, but yeah, I got bored and I found some styrofoam balls, and I had a can of spray paint.
Oh, those are so sweet.
The glue gun was just out. I mean, I don't know why I had the glue gun out. So, you know, I was wondering if you can murder somebody with a glue gun, and it does hurt if you get it on your fingers, but I just decided to make some blueberries. And then my son was commenting on, because my office is in my bedroom and it's a kind of a big bedroom, but he's like, Mom, you really don't want to show where you sleep. So he sent me this, and then I bedazzled it. I could do more.
Love it.
I could do better, but you know, this is as much as I could do right now. So yeah, it's my blueberry background. With blueberry, kind of got the blueberries on the brain.
And how about you, Cheryl?
Well, I'm in our little tiny condo in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida, where every day it's approximately 1 billion degrees.
Oh my gosh, we just went through a heat wave here in Seattle, not quite 1 billion degrees, but to us in Seattle, every hot day feels like 1 billion degrees. So
our heat wave lasts until mid-October. I got a ways to go.
Oh my gosh. Well, sending cool thoughts your way. And Barbara.
So I'm in my study in Portland, Maine, with all the windows open, Cheryl, just enjoying the cool ocean breezes.
Oh, it sounds beautiful.
Yeah, talk to me in the winter.
When do you want us to arrive?
I know you're going to have a lot of guests. How about you, Lee?
Well, I wish I was with Barbara right now in Portland, Maine, but I am in Palm Springs, California, where it's 107 degrees, which is a cold front for us in August. So as long as there's zeros in the middle, we're fine. We're okay.
Yeah, we don't know that heat. We don't know that heat in Michigan, and probably not in Maine.
Well, so this question's for everybody. In fact, all of these questions are going to be from everyone, but I'll start off and call on someone to answer first. So you all write in a subgenre of mystery called cozy mysteries. And how would you describe the genre? And we'll start off with Cheryl.
I frequently say if Agatha Christie was writing from Cabot Cove, that's the story you would get. But, you know, it's something that both my mother and my granddaughter could read and go to sleep peacefully.
I am writing that down because that is such a perfect description. Who would like to follow Cheryl? Lee, you look like you would.
Well, I've always thought the term was incongruous because you've got cozy and you've got murder. So it's like the two don't really go together. But I feel like I grew up in a very cozy town, Bar Harbor, Maine, and you know, we had 4,000 people in the winter, and then all these summer tours, and there were so many story opportunities that come out of that from the locals and the tourists, and that's kind of what got me into what I thought was the cozy genre. So I just started writing about my hometown, and my sister did live in the town at the time we started these books, and so we drew on a lot of those experiences, and plus you know, Jessica Fletcher was from Maine too, so we felt like it was a natural.
Great.
Darci, how about you?
For me, I love it. It's like almost like visiting a rom-com, or like your favorite sitcom. They're familiar. They're not going to be scary. They're kind of, people say a tame read. You know, like we say, there's murder. They're the most dangerous small towns in America that we write about. They're charming. You want to go there. You want to, you know, eat in the cafes. But they're, you know, when you pick up a cozy mystery that you're not gonna get anything very graphic. You're gonna get a murder, but it's a clever solve. You know, you're gonna get maybe a little romance, but it's not gonna be, you know, super steamy. It's not, you know, it's really a read that, oh my gosh, I'm sure we all have readers that anywhere from like, you know, 14 to 100. So, I mean, that's what's kind of neat. They know when they pick that book up, it's going to be an enjoyable read. And so I just think they're fun. And also it's a non-professional solving the mystery, which is also cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
And Barbara?
So I always say it's a traditional mystery in the sense that it's the central question is who done it, and that it's a closed circle of people. So the victim, the suspect, and all of the red herrings are all known, typically known to one another in these books. So it's never going to be a Colombian drug cartel or the CIA or the Russian mafia. It's going to be in a closed circle. I have a reaction when people say it's a traditional mystery, but there's no bad language and sex takes place off the page and it's not particularly gory. As somebody said, people die, but people don't linger on it, because I don't like to define things in terms of what I didn't write. I get fan letters that say things like, and there was no swearing. And I'm like, honestly, I wrote all those words and all you can comment on is the words that weren't in it. So I don't really like to define it that way, but certainly everything everyone has said is true about A Cozy Mystery.
Debra?
Well, for me, it is a book that you can read at the beach, you can read on an airplane, you can read quickly, and you can escape from the world. It's because of the amateur sleuth, it's a whodunit that you can be an equal to solving.
Mhm.
And I like that fact. Coming from my legal background and such, I wanted things, this was my escape reading. And it was wonderful. You could knock off a few of these as you cross the country in a plane, and you could just relax and enjoy. And that's what I liked about them. Plus, from a writer's perspective, I think it's fun to figure out a different way to kill people without being as gory. You know, and I know we're going to talk more culinary, but not being an expert in that field, I have so much fun with my friends who are chefs, who are teaching me things like, how do you do an ice pick murder? You know, which knife should I use to get it in the right spot? Oh, you mean a bread knife is too big? Well, what works on sinew? Oh, okay. Oh, wow, that's a small knife. I guess I could do that. You know, so that's the fun of it. It is a fun concept.
That is great. Thank you all. Those were great answers. I just have one quick note to mention about the chat to our panelists. If you want to communicate with the audience, do you see the little caret that says hosts and panelists? Just click on that and select everyone. Otherwise, the audience will not be able to see your response, just hosts and panelists, if that is showing up on your screen. Okay. And speaking of food, you did mention food, Debra. All of your cozy mysteries feature food. What is it about food and murder that makes for a perfect mystery? Let's start with Darci, since she's surrounded by blueberries.
I'm not food on my wall. That's how much I love
Murdering blueberries.
You know, it was so funny because when I started writing historical fiction. And I always loved reading stories, even if they were historical fiction, but I was always focused on a meal people were making, and I'm like, oh, what does that taste like? Especially if it was like an old timey dish. And so when I decided to write a mystery, I didn't realize that you could put food in it. I think the first cozy mystery series that I just adored, and I got every book, was I loved MC Beaton's Hamish Macbeth and Agatha Raisin. And so I was just drawn to that, and the tea, and just, it was a very cozy, fun feeling. So when I wrote it, and my agent said, well, you wrote a cozy mystery. First of all, I didn't know I wrote a cozy mystery. And secondly, she said, you need a hook. And I'm like, well, what do you mean like hook? And she goes, hook. And she starts to explain a hook. And she got to food. And I'm like, whoa, I can do food. Stop there. So my brother bought a bakery when we were younger. He was probably like 28 and I was like 30 something. And I had little kids and he had no idea what he was doing. He was in film and video. And so I really, I wasn't a paid employee, let's just say that, but he'd call me like the day before and say, can you come in at like 4 and 5 in the morning and frost cakes? And I have a wedding cake due. And, and we just kind of threw ourselves into the job and it was a lot of fun. But it really taught me a lot about bakeries. I love baking. I don't think I would want to do it professionally, but writing about a bakery was wonderful. And that kind of food, when you read food, it's such a human connection. Murder, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that's, I think the puzzle of murder, we're all fascinated. I think that is a human fascination. We see something, gory, or we read something and we're like, oh, your mind just goes like, how'd that happen? Who did that? But as far as like the food, I think that just connects us as humans. And I think all of us who write those food cozies, we want our readers to experience, our culture or our small town through the food. So, I mean, yay food.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Yay food is right. Anybody else want to weigh in on this question?
I think I probably have to go the opposite way. As you all know, I have food, but after having had 2 books orphaned, when I wanted to write this series, I started thinking what a cozy would be. And I was thinking, well, they often have baking. I don't like to bake. They have crafts. I hate that stuff. They have cooking. Let's see. I know if my stove says F3, I've blown it up. If it's F8, it's just on fire. I learned that during the pandemic. But so I created the opposite. I have the character who finds being in the kitchen more frightening than murder. And instead of great recipes, when they told me I had to have recipes, I almost died. So my recipe is like Jell-O in a can. Because I think the recipe, I had to do something. So I had to do recipes that my kind of cook could make. Very simple or prepared ingredients. As the books go on, I did incorporate, a little more in terms of recipes, but I'm just the opposite of you, Darci. I run from the kitchen. That's why my friends who are the chefs in town are having such a ball teaching me what's in the kitchen.
Well, I gotta side with Debra here, because the reason I write with my sister is because I can't cook. I can barely make a cocktail. I can almost open a wine bottle. Okay.
How do you do that?
That's difficult when you're writing the Haley Powell Food and Cocktails Mysteries with recipes. So I'm very blessed that my sister's an excellent cook and can come in and write the columns and the recipes and the cocktails and all of that, because I grew up watching Macmillan and Wife and Heart to Heart and all the crime shows. So the murder part I was ready for. But the same with Debra, the kitchen stuff scared the bejesus out of me.
I'm exactly the same. My husband does all my recipes but the funny part is that I write about a clam bake. So when my agent and I first started talking about the series, he literally, you know what this is, a cozy mystery, yada, 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 culinary, yada, yada. I mean, he literally yada, yada it. And I'm so eager, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. But a clam bake, first of all, is the same meal every time. It serves the same meal twice a day to 100 guests every day. And the other thing about it is that it's not really good for home cooking. Like, dig a large pit, fill it with hardwood, go out and get seaweed. I mean, it's not really practical. So when I handed in the proposal, I didn't include recipes, and I was hoping to get away with that. But about the 3rd time my agent sent it out, he realized it, and I had to put recipes in. So I chased my mother for our precious family blueberry grunt recipe, and she finally had to confess after the 3rd time I called her that it was actually James Beard's recipe. So I finally
Gosh,
figured out they don't all eat every meal at the clam bake, so I just can deal with needing to have recipes in that way.
So Barbara, that was actually the perfect pairing of mystery and food, because not only did your writing about food expose your long kept family secrets, but you also, in your step about making clam bakes, that's pretty much how you would hide a body, right? Dig a large pit, cover it with seaweed. So it sounds like the perfect pairing.
Yeah, I do. In the second book, a foot rolls out of the fire, but I don't linger.
Oh. How about you, Cheryl?
Oh, well, I'm kind of, I'm a grown cook, and I mean grown from scratch cook. I don't remember not being able to cook. I remember grabbing a stool and watching my grandmother make biscuits from scratch with not a single measuring cup in sight. She would make biscuits out of a big bowl of flour, make a little hole, break eggs, add buttermilk, salt, and just squish it together. Now put that in a book. That's a recipe that cannot be repeated, but the best biscuits on the planet. She made them every morning. So I learned at her elbow how to cook, and I don't use measuring cups either. So it's always a trial for me to put a recipe in a book. I must test it like 7 or 8 times because I'm using measuring cups. So it's always an adventure, and most of them I've heard turn out really well, but it's hard to get me to follow that.
When you're writing, what comes first? Your recipe, your plot, your murder, your characters? What starts this whole process for each of you? Lee, would you like to start?
Yeah, because I'm actually ready with this answer, unlike a lot of the others.
Oh, nice.
Well, especially the Haley Powell series, we start with the title, because every title we start with Death of a Kitchen Diva, Death of a Coupon Clipper, and all food related in some way. And so we always brainstorm the titles, and then once we have like the new one, Death of an Ice Cream Scooper, well, you know, that's ice cream recipes, and then obviously there's a freezer truck that delivers the ice cream, so the body has to be found there. And I'm I was very fortunate that one of my best friends, who I go to visit and stay with in Bar Harbor, owns Mount Desert Island Ice Cream, which is a big, she has a store in Portland where Barbara is. She has a store all over in Japan, and so I just basically stole her life, and hopefully she won't sue me, and threw in a murder, and so all of the books seem to come out of, we find a fun title that gives us a theme of food, and to do the recipes, and then we take it from there.
I love that. Anyone want to go next?
For me, it's usually a little movie in my head of the discovery of the body. That's usually kind of the first inkling I have, and then I have to figure out why that body would be in that place, and who would have a motive, who many people would have a motive to have it end up there. Lee and I are writing another set of novellas together for next year, and that's all I have right now is a little movie about the discovery of the body.
It's not really easy given the title we have, is it, Barbara?
What's your title? Do you mind
Christmas Mitten Murder.
Ooh. And how about you, Cheryl?
I actually, because each book is slightly different, my protagonist teaches art. Basically, she takes her clients, she runs a cultural business in Eastern Kentucky. So she takes her clients up on a mountain trail and teaches them in a group setting to do one of those, paintings, and then brings them back to the farmhouse and feeds them a traditional Southern meal paired with homebrewed moonshine. So that part is pretty much set. But what kind of art and where they go to create the art actually leads me to discover the body. So if they're sketching, then it can be, you know, a little more remote because they don't have to take so much stuff with them. And so
That's
of course,
practical.
that's where they found the body.
How about you, Deborah?
I kind of go for either a sentence that comes into my head and that keys me into the book, or a concept. Like in 5 Bells Too Many, I really wanted to do a game show. I love reality game shows, but there had been something with this Perfect Southern Wedding. So I thought that would be a great place to drop Sarah in, but put her in a backwards position. Don't make her the contestant, stick her in as the chaperone and make her mother the contestant. Yeah, so my goal is to make the concept stand on its head and yet give you what you know in reality. So I go for humor.
Oh, that's
Darci?
I'm gonna just have to say, I like the Barbara Ross way. I used to try to do it around the baked goods, because for my series, baked goods are kind of front and center. And so I always try to, you know, have a theme like, oh, blueberries this time, you know, I can, you know, so I start thinking about that, but then I just see bodies and my body will appear in my head so unrelated to my theme. So I don't know, what is it about murder mystery writing? This is, you know, why do we see bodies? But sometimes that's the challenge. It's like, why is that body there?
So this is a question that, so not only do I love reading mysteries, I also love watching mystery series. And so my question is, as I've watched these as well, do you start with the murder? And most of you seem to be starting kind of with a murder, but do you start with that end result and then kind of work your way back to figure out how it happened? Or do you do it the other way around, where you know who the characters are and how they interact, and then kind of set up that murder based around them, if that makes any sense? Basically, how do you figure out all of those really inventive ways of getting to that murder? Do you do a lot of murder research is the question. Barbara, you were smiling, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I actually start with the murder and then write myself into various corners trying to figure out who would have a motive and why. And I think probably for most of us, there's that backwards part, but there's also an ongoing arc through our series. So we're also thinking about where our protagonist is at the beginning of the story and where that protagonist will be at the end of the story. So you're kind of working in both directions, I think.
Thank you. Let's see. Darci.
Okay. I have the hardest time. I'm a pretty passive person, and I have the hardest time like thinking of why would somebody murder somebody. So for me, I spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about murder, recipes of murder. And so I used to work at a library, and we had a section, you know, writing section, and there was a book called it was like A Writer's Guide to Poisons. And nobody had checked it out in so long. And when you're in a library and you know you pull books and you're like, oh, it hasn't been checked out in 3 years, we can pull this from the collection. And then I took it home and I had it on my desk for a long time, and I'd read through it. And my husband saw it and he's like, well, what do you have on your desk? I'm like so freaked out by that. It's like anything can kill you, you know. So, but for me, it's that motive too. Like it's fun to like have. It's not fun. It's kind of sick. But when you see that great body just appearing somewhere, and then you try to figure out why would somebody do that. I think that's a real challenge, but it's a lot of fun, you know. And then for me, I have to incorporate a lot of baked goods along with that. So
Deborah?
Well, for me, again, I go back to the humor concept of I want to enjoy what I'm writing. So the first thing I want to do is in each book, I usually want to use some different kind of way of killing somebody. So that'll come first. Like I'll get an idea, like I said, of, you know, with the ice pick kill. Oh, I knew so I needed to learn about knives for, you know, that book. For other books, I come up with the concept of how I'm going to commit the first murder. And the other way is as I said, I've been having a lot of the chefs in Birmingham, which is a foodie town. They've taken me through their restaurants, and I'm so darn naive. Like, you know, one took me through this really neat little room. Everything was so nice on the shelves, and it was kind of cool in there. And then as we walked through, we came out the other side, and they said, "Do you know where you've been?" And I said, "Well, I guess a cold room." They said, "No, that's a walk-through freezer. If it had a door here, it would have been a walk-in only. If it hadn't, you know, we couldn't have gone through." And I go, "Oh, wow, I could bet I could do something, you know, maybe things could fall down." I mean, that's how my mind works. I look for the weapon first, and the body is, you know, going to be there killed. And then once I get going on the story with the characters, it just seems to naturally go into whatever the next murder is going to be. My mind just loves it. My husband gets nervous, but my mind loves it.
That should be a clip that you should play on your website forever. Cheryl, how about you?
Well, I'm a recovered engineer, as you know, so I am going to plot out my mystery in a linear fashion from A to Z. And because I am, you know, having tourists, they're fresh blood every book, you know, new tourists, new opportunities. So I basically, even though I know who my primary villain is, I make each suspect definitely possible to have done the murder. Because of the 9 books I've published, in 3 of them, I changed who the murderer was in like the last 2 weeks of writing the book. And because I had laid that kind of groundwork, it wasn't all that hard to do, and it made it a better book.
Lee?
Well, as I mentioned, I grew up in the most beautiful tourist town in Maine, but I never wanted to leave the house because I always wanted to be in front of the television. And it was only later that I realized how beautiful Maine was when I actually left the house and got out of the state. So I have this odd, troubling encyclopedic knowledge of 70s and 80s detective shows. So I can be writing, like I mentioned, I have a theme or whatever, I'm working on the book, but then something will come into my head, like, remember that Heart to Heart episode where they had the poison champagne for the wedding toast, and something will come off that, and then I'll start thinking about my characters. And so I kind of like, I never steal, but it's just like, I feel these cards shuffling in my head a lot, you know, in terms of, oh, Charlie's Angels season 2. I remember they did this thing where, you know, and I'm getting help for it, I promise you. But but it has helped me in terms of the murder weapons and sometimes motivations and you know, all of that stuff. You know, interestingly enough, is I never really watched Murder, She Wrote religiously, because it was a little later in life when I was already in college. So I should probably go back and watch that show.
Store those in your mind, then you have some more to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
So funny.
So Darci, you mentioned your husband's raised eyebrows about your research that was lying there, which is, I think, going to be a great question for all of you. So was there anything that you were looking up? You had research papers on your desks or open on your computer that someone happened to walk by and think, I think I am going to go over there now. And we will start with, since Darci already had one, we'll give you a chance to think of another one if you want. We'll start this time with Debra.
Actually, I have one of my short stories is based on that kind of actual thing happening. When I wrote Should Have Played Poker, I had a line in it about killing the husband. And she says something like, I thought about killing your father when, you know, by hitting him over the head, by doing this, or just poisoning his oatmeal. Okay, now, one of my friends is who's my beta reader, had just gotten a new iPhone, and she didn't know how to use it real well. But she decided, they were driving back from New Orleans, so she was going to read the chapters I had sent her on her phone. But she didn't realize when she put her finger on it too hard, she cut and paste. Now, back up, this woman every morning walked with our rabbi's wife. And what she did, the rabbi's wife had an accident and was walking that morning. But the rabbi's wife the next day texted her, did you walk today? And what the rabbi's wife read was, no. When I got up, I thought about killing him. And it listed the 3 ways. The rabbi's wife freaked because she is a licensed social worker thing. And she goes, oh my God, should I turn her in for threatening? Because I know they've had a little bit of marital issue. And should I turn her in? No, she's not my patient. So she texted back, do you need to talk? And the friend responded, but didn't respond because, she didn't know this phone and she was out running errands. So she didn't think about any of it. So finally, the rabbi's wife called the house on the then home phone, got the husband, and she said, blank, have you had breakfast yet? And he said, yeah, I went to McDonald's. And the rabbi's wife went, oh, thank God, McDonald's. Anyway, it was shortly thereafter that the other one saw it. I ended up having to send the chapter to the rabbi's wife to prove that it wasn't a threat to the guy. Yes, the answer is yes.
Wow, that is quite a story.
And
oh
that
my
became
gosh.
one of my early short stories.
I mean, how do you follow that?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, but Lee, you're gonna follow
Oh
it.
gosh, no, I can't follow that. All I will say is I just hope no one ever, does a search history on how to poison people or the best poisons, the fastest working poisons. And it's just all in my history. So I live in fear every day.
Can anybody else think of a story that you want to share about that or?
So I had one like Debra's. We were in Cambridge, Massachusetts in a restaurant in a booth. And Cambridge is the county seat of Middlesex County, Massachusetts. So it is where the courthouse is and where the DA is and all of that. And my friend, Sherry Harris, who writes the Sarah Winston Garage Sale Mysteries, says to me in a very unmodulated voice, oh my God, this DA is such a pain in my neck. I'm going to have him killed. And I'm sitting in the booth facing her, and I see these 2 little faces come up from the seat behind her, and they're both looking at her. So you do have to be careful what you say and where you say it.
Oh my gosh. Darci and Cheryl, anything come to mind?
Well,
I mean, Darci, you already had your example, but if you have another one.
I have another one.
Oh, perfect.
Well, no, I worked at the library while I was writing some of these. And so my library work computer, I would just keep Googling like, what's the weirdest thing that could kill somebody? Like I just kept writing weird things like that. And then the person who would sit down next to me would see my search history because that comes up. So you just have to really be careful with that. But and learn how to erase a good search history. But I think Googling how to kill somebody is horrible. But I have 3 sons. And so when I would like come into the kitchen or get coffee, they just would try to tell me ways to kill people. So in that respect, I don't think there's anything I could do that shocked anybody in this house. Some of them are pretty, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Cheryl? Anything?
I did a lot of research on nicotine because I wanted that to be a primary poison, but I didn't want it to be from any of the traditional methods. So I spent, of course, way too much time figuring that one out. And it turns out that this common little plant that you can get at Lowe's called nicotina can be obscenely poisonous. And of course, it's everywhere in Florida. It's just this pretty little white flower that everybody uses in landscaping. So it's just, yeah, search history.
Yeah, anything can kill you.
Sometimes the most innocent questions can get you into, I had to figure out how to mail something so we wouldn't be able to know exactly where it came from, but the sleuth had to figure it out like 3 days later. So it ultimately had to be discoverable. So I'm just Googling how to mail packages without, postmarks on the web. Suddenly I am in places because apparently paying with Bitcoin and mailing drugs in this way is like, I am suddenly in places like, I should not be here.
Well, those are quite a lot of very interesting examples. Has anyone ever been approached by authorities because of this?
No.
Okay, good.
Well, actually, what was funny for
Uh-oh.
me, no, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as the last one. But when I first started writing, I was still on the bench. And being a government employee, anything I wrote had to go up to the ethics people to be approved. So that meant any murder short story, any murder novel, because it was a written thing, and I did try to keep the two careers separate, but just to cover my tail, I was sending everything up, and it kept ending up at the same ethics officer up in Washington, who kept looking at this stuff. And we got to be friends because, A, there was enough of this stuff, and B, excuse me, what are you doing in your life? So, yeah, she buys the books now, but at that point it got to be really funny, because it was, oh no, here comes another one.
Let's move to some audience questions really quickly. This is from Beth. I'm wondering how all the authors with multiple books keep the series fresh and conceive new storylines when they write from a specific town or geographic place that exists in real life. Anybody want to go first?
I'll start. I write, both of my series are places that are very real to me. One of them is set in downtown St. Petersburg, and research is really easy. I just walk out the door, look around for a restaurant or a bar. It's fabulous. I do try to put in cultural landmarks as well. But my recent series, the one that, this is book 3, it's actually set in Eastern Kentucky. And this is where my parents were born, raised, married, and now rest in peace in Wolfe County, Kentucky, in the Addams Family Cemetery. Yes, that's Addams Family. That's us. So the setting is my dad's farmhouse, which his father built from a Sears catalog, ordered and delivered to the foot of the hill. And you can still see the numbers in the rafters, how they put it together. And so setting it is just really, really easy. And most of the people in my books for that setting are made of people down there combined into a little Frankenstein. And then that monster actually becomes a character and becomes well known to me. So it's, I still have a character, I still have a Bible though for the series, so that I know that the Ranger's eyes are green instead of blue and then brown and then, not that that's ever happened.
Detail.
Anyone else want to go?
I agree with what Cheryl said. I mean, in Bar Harbor, I grew up there. I left at 18 though, and I moved to New York and then Los Angeles. But it's such a special place to me, and I go back so much that every time I go back, I get inspired. And so I was just there last month, and seeing a lot of the people who inspired characters throughout the series. There were a lot of people that I grew up with who I kind of like did the same as Cheryl, take bits and pieces, and although a lot of them recognize themselves, that's no issue there. But but just going back last month gave me new characters and new ideas, and just spending a few weeks there, I just find it inspiring. And as the same as Cheryl also is my other series, Poppy Harmon's set here in Palm Springs. So it's very easy. And I know all the restaurants, and you go out there, and but I mix it up. Like all the series, I've always done real places as nods to local businesses and things like that. I like to promote people, and my characters go to all these places, but I also make up a lot of places too. Like there are some readers that come here looking for certain places that just don't exist. So I know that can be controversial with a lot of mysteries. People like it one way or the other, but yeah. I've always been schizophrenic, so I'm like, fine.
I think
Fiction.
It's fiction, exactly.
Yeah, it can be hard.
Until it turns into a theme park.
Right. Like, but for instance, I like in Bar Harbor, there's an old bar there called the Thirsty Whale, and it's still there. It was there during my childhood, and I just named it "Drinks Like a Fish" in my books, just to make it a little different. You know.
Protect the innocent.
Yes, because a lot of murders happen there. In the book, in the fiction.
Well, and I think that's the whole thing with writing a series and why we're writers, because, listen to you guys talk, it's like, I just think the ideas keep coming, and I think it's exciting to put new murders into these little towns, but you don't really run out when you really are passionate about it. And you guys get to see your town. My town's pretty fictitious, but it's kind of like the best of every little Michigan town. So people think they know what town it is, but it's really bits and pieces. But just coming up, you get excited when you think, maybe we could do this, or maybe we can, for me, it's like, oh, maybe I could do an apple baked good book, And then I tend to think of, food groupings, like what ingredients I can use as to, who gets murdered, but that's another problem. But
so then the farmer's market is your inspiration.
Yeah, 100%, like bread, I mean, but I think that's why we do what we do, because the days the ideas dried up, the day the ideas dry up, then it's, then I'm out of here. Time to get a different jobs, I guess.
And I think we are all good at stealing. I mean, the reality is we take, like, for example, in Sarah Blair Mysteries, I use a small southern town. Most southern towns had a square. When I ran Witnesses, I saw the same square in every one. So I still that concept, then I put it in, and as you're saying, Darci, you take the characters, and you take the memories you had, like Lee's talking about. I grew up first in the East, and then we moved to Michigan. And this town in Michigan we moved to was 5 miles square, which was a big difference than growing up, in New Jersey. But so all of a sudden I knew what it was like to explore on the back of a bicycle, where you could only ride around on the cement where I had grown up originally. And now I could go anywhere, and nobody locked their doors. It was just a whole different concept. So you steal all that. And the other part of that question is to make it more interesting, because I think there was once an analysis done, and I think it was over 1,200 people were killed in Cabot Cove during so many years. But so that's why you bring in characters, you bring in the TV show from New York, but you put it in your setting so that you're mixing it up. I think if you look at Louise Penny, Three Pines, she does that. She'll bring in people from out here. She'll occasionally send Gamache out here, but she'll bring it in. Even the new book she just wrote with Hillary Clinton, at one point, all of a sudden, Three Pines came into it. So there's a great way of mixing it up. And I think that's what everybody on this, because I've read everybody's books, I think we all do that. It's intuitive stealing.
Borrowing.
Love that.
You're nicer than I am. You bake. I don't.
Any other answers to that question, or do you want me to repeat the question? Or
I like to think, what would I like to know more about? So I pick something typically Maine that interests me. So I have a book about oyster farming, which, like, who knew? But turns out to be fascinating. Or the ice industry, why these wacky post-colonials, shipped ice to India in the holds of ships, So I like to find something that I want to know more about, and I can kind of pick at and really enjoy the research, because if you're going to do it, you might as well be learning about something that's interesting to you.
So Darci, this is also from one of our audience. Was it a conscious effort on attire to wear a blouse that looked like a web of mystery?
Oh
Well done.
We were on another Zoom, and I was wearing a blue shirt, and it was rasterizing, and it was looking so bad. So I pulled another kind of blue shirt out. Yes, it is a web of lies and mystery. I did that consciously.
And that leads to the question from the audience member, Beth. How much do the author's characters or genre blend into their real lives, even if unknowingly? Can you shut it off or not? And I'm starting to get the sense that it's not. There's murders everywhere, but seriously, yes. Are you able to shut off the aspects of your inspirations, or do you welcome it into your lives all the time? And how much do your characters and genre blend into your lives? Cheryl?
Kind of have a weird way of ending my writing every day, in that I stop in the middle of a thought or in the middle of a scene, so that and it put it on the back burner to just be thinking about, until I get back to my office the next morning. And I will think of, whatever is frustrating me, while I'm going about my day, but I'm not consciously, sitting and thinking about, what is she going to do? How is she going to get out of this? In small details. I have big details in the outline, but when I do that almost every time, when I come back in the morning, get my coffee, and the solution is there.
That's a cool.
Barbara?
Can you turn it off? That's a really interesting question. I can certainly turn off the drudgery of sitting at my desk for hours every day. I mean, I'm kind of off now till after BoucherCon, so after Labor Day, and I'm pretty good at that. But even with that, you're still kind of looking around, you're getting ideas, you're thinking about the next project. And I totally agree with Cheryl. It's the subconscious is a marvelous thing. And the trick is accessing it, right? The trick is actually reaching it. It's not that it's not doing its job. It's doing its job 24/7. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really interesting how that happens. When you're working on something or you don't even, your brain a lot of times I'll just say, look, I'm going to go here. I'm here. I want to go here. And I just kind of trust the process that it happens. The next time you sit down, it's amazing how that works. And I think it's a lot of fun. And usually it's always the right answer. But as far as, I can totally leave my sitting down part. I can walk away from that all the time.
How about you, Debra?
I'm a spurt writer. I will find many things to distract myself for weeks on end. And like if I turn in a book, I take a month off to read just everybody else's books. But my mind is working at the same time. And I laugh at myself because sometimes I will tell myself that, oh, this is how it's going to go. And then, they talk about, we hear the voices in our heads. I get the feeling Lee does. But those voices will tell me I'm screwing up. The characters will tell me I'm screwing up. And if I keep trying to push it the wrong way, it doesn't work. When I finally let it relax enough to let it come out, it's exactly what Barbara's saying. It's the subconscious, and you'll go, oh my gosh, how could I have not done it that way? And then that's when it's the best. Like I said, when the writing is good, it is wonderful. When it's not, I think I better go read or eat. Ice cream.
Which leads us right to Lee. Would you like to answer that question?
I mean, starting tomorrow, I'm going to try Cheryl's way because I think that's amazing to leave in the middle of a sentence. Because I am so anal retentive. I do the chapter, and then I can't end the day unless I finish the chapter. And it leads to a lot of self-torture. But I absolutely agree about getting up and because if I'm stuck, if I sit in the front of the computer, it's not going to come. It just won't. And so getting up and I can be at a Starbucks or behind the wheel or on an airplane and suddenly it'll pop into your head. Then you're running for your phone to start writing, you know, typing with the thought before you forget it. So yeah, I'm a big believer in going to the movies when you can't really come up with a.
You go to mysteries,
good
or
one.
do you go to something else?
Anything. I'll go to anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a question / comment from Maggie in the audience. When will Mrs. Darrowfield return? Love all your books, Barbara. Darci, I'm reading your newest Blueberry book right now, and it's great. We always thought you were a woman.
I half am. I half
Yeah,
am.
you half am. Half
At least
am.
in one series.
And thanks to all of you for keeping Maggie connected to Maine. She is now in North Carolina to be closer to their grandchildren.
Aw.
So yes. Question from Barbara. Question for Barbara. How did you come up with the idea for the family to have ancestors in the ice business?
Well, as I said, to me, I don't know where it came from ultimately, but I mean, literally, that's like such a wacky thing that when there weren't even roads in New England, people would be chopping up ice and sending it to Cuba. It's just such a crazy thing, but I'm fascinated by things that have a very finite time frame, a beginning and an end, like the Wild West. The Wild West is like 15 years, you know, and then the frontier is closed. And the ice industry is like that. It has a finite beginning, and then refrigeration comes in and commercial ice making, and it ends. And that just fascinates me. So, and also there's a lot of accessible research. The guy who started the ice industry in the 1820s is a fascinating, Frederick Tudor, fascinating and crazy man. And all his papers are at Harvard Business School Library. And there have been 2 really good books written about him. So if you're interested, there's plenty more, and it's amazing.
Thank you. This is a question from Beth. Can you give writers and producers grace, or do you read and watch things and say to yourself, oh, that's wrong, that would never happen? I ask because one past job I had was in production, and I had a hard time breaking free and was always criticizing script continuity. Can you help but critique other works? And anyone jump in for this one?
You know, I try never to critique somebody else's work, because as writers, we know how hard it is to write. I mean, it looks like it's, you know, when you read something, you're like, oh, that must have been easy to write, you know, but when you're actually there. So my thing is, when I watch movies with the kids, I will tell them how the movie's going to end, you know, because you can see that thought process, you know what I'm saying? And it kind of ruins it. Or you're like, they have one of 2 choices here. Yeah, and sometimes you're surprised, but you know what I mean? Like, since we live in the process, it's easy for us, and it kind of maybe ruins things a little bit, but I'm still surprised at mysteries, to be honest. I can never solve mysteries on TV. I fall asleep right before the big reveal, and then I wake up at the end. I don't know what happens. I don't know why, but yeah.
Else have some thoughts on that one?
I think I've become a lot fussier about what I do watch. I want high quality mysteries. When I'm spending time away from writing to watch, I don't want to say, well, yeah, that would never happen. Or, you know, or when characters fight with each other for just no reason except to take up time. I have no patience with that. You know, I would like, you know, really good drama. So I find I watch less television, and that's not a bad thing.
Oh, I watch garbage.
I was going to say I do too. Yeah.
Me too.
We just came out of a pandemic. I watched everything.
Yeah, I mean, I can still be a fan, and that's really important to me. If I think honestly, if it were a choice between writing and not being able to be a fan of fellow authors and of television and movies, I think I'd give up the writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key for us is if we're watching, or at least for me, if I'm watching something, if I can just lose myself in it and relax, same with a book. I write to escape, and I wish to escape when I'm reading. Now, I am finding as a writer, I'm more critical in my sense of reading. And so I don't read it with the same way I did. That's why I like to take a month off and just read for pleasure, because then I go back to being what that human being I once was.
Yeah.
I agree with Deborah. I sometimes reading, I kind of like, why couldn't I think of that word? Or why couldn't I think of that phrase? That's so great, you know? And so I get a little insecure, but I also, you know, I totally agree with Cheryl. It's like, there's so many good shows now, and you can select something really good. But I also, there's something comforting for me to watch. Like, I'll order old DVDs of black and white detective shows from the 50s and 60s. Like, I'm watching this show Surfside 6 right now, which was done in 1960, and I'm binging it. I bought the entire show, and it's like, you know, it puts me to sleep at night, and it's a terribly written show. It's just awful. And I can't stop watching it because I'm just fascinated by how easy I wrote for television for 30 years. I'm like, how easy it must have been to be a writer back then.
I bet the acting was good too.
Oh my, well, Troy Donahue was in it, you know. And but I also have an appreciation for that kind of show, and you know, that's why when I moved to LA, you know, there were people love Norman Lear and all these trailblazers, and I just wanted to meet Aaron Spelling, you know. That's who I wanted to meet, and I did actually. And so I think there's a balance. Like, I enjoy the comfort food, but I also enjoy the stuff that kind of challenges you a little bit, and are really good. And but I'm also like Darci. I'm always trying to think of the ending. I'm always trying to beat it.
Well, how are they going to end this? How are they going to end
Mixed
this?
results.
Like, sometimes like those really terrible shows, there's a brilliance to how terrible they are, and I love that. Like, you know what I mean? They just kind of, I don't know. It's that's weird. I can't critique that at all either.
Well, those were great answers, and I could keep this conversation going forever because it's so much fun. We're at time, but we do have a fun closing out activity here, which I'd mentioned to you all in the green room. So each of you is going to pick one question to ask one of your fellow authors, and then that person's going to ask someone else a question. Really short, fun, snappy questions to kind of close out to the evening. And let's start with Barbara.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Lee, what are you working on now?
In terms of books,
yes,
I am working on
No.
Yeah, well, I'm working right now. I was supposed to start today, but didn't seem to happen, you know. But I was supposed to start the novella that Barbara and Leslie Meyer and I were doing, A Christmas Mitten Murder. So I was going to get a jump on that. And then we also have another one called Easter Basket Murder.
That's the one I have.
Well, that I can't even begin, you know.
Well,
and
yeah,
then,
because
sometime after that, then I start the fourth book in the Maya and Sandra mysteries. I do these Murder at the PTA, Murder at the Bake Sale, and and Murder at the Class Trip, which will be out in December. And now I'm starting on Murder at the Spelling Bee, so that'll be the fourth one.
I am so happy to hear you blew off today, because I always think of you as so disciplined. That just makes my little heart just a bit of that.
Well, I guess it's my turn, so I'm going to go right to Deborah.
Thank you.
She fascinated me when she said when she was on the bench, and I just want to hear more about that.
I spent 23 years as one of the federal administrative law judges on the bench. And I will very quickly tell my one comedy story from there, which is why I got off the bench. I had a choice. I had a lifetime appointment, and I started writing. I wrote my first book, and as I said, I kept those two things separate. When I sold my second book, the Should Have Played Poker book, I sold it in August of 14. The 15 calendar was filled, and you all know that, you know, the publishing calendars. So I was told it would come out in January of 16. Well, when you're on the bench as long as I was, you know the attorneys. You've got them trained. And especially if you were a Perry Mason fanatic, as I was. So I would look at these people and I would say, is there anything further? They were trained, they were supposed to say, no, Your Honor. And I would say a closing. On this particular day, the client said, yes, there's one more thing. And I looked at the attorney and he went, so I knew he couldn't handle the client. So I looked at the client and I said, yes, sir, what is it? He goes, Your Honor, I just want you to know one thing. No matter how you rule, I'm gonna buy your book. I know he didn't because I ruled against him, but I went home that night and I said to my husband, we got the last kid out of school. Let's make a decision. If the numbers work, I want to follow my passion. And that's what I did.
Oh, that's great.
So, and that's where I am now. So let me throw a question out to somebody else. Cheryl?
Yep.
I'm going to do an easy one. Hats. Tell us about the hats.
Oh, the hats. I started wearing hats in 1975. We first moved down to Florida then, and I basically have mostly worn them all my life, but in 75, I was parking way out at the end of the parking lot, and it's Florida, 92 billion degrees. And, hats really work both in the winter and the summer. And I wear them all the time. Deborah and Barbara can tell you I do. And I only have 24. So
What
I
do you do
really
the
love
other
my
6
hats.
days?
So I get, can I?
There's Darci and Barbara
Have you-
left.
Barbara. So let's rip open the underbelly of writing here. What do you hate the most?
Oh, well, for me, that's easy. I hate first drafts. I hate them. I describe it as being dragged across a parking lot by your tongue. And I'm always looking for like the balance of panic, like the panic that it's terrible has to be balanced with the panic that you're not going to meet the deadline, but you can't tip over into panic paralysis. So you got to manage your panic perfectly. After that, I am such a happy little clam. I will do 40 revisions. I will read page proofs, anything, but that first draft kills me.
Well, I guess you are going to ask Darci a question.
Oh, no. Be nice.
Well, I have to ask this, being from Maine, Michigan is the other blueberry state. So tell us something about something you uncovered in your blueberry research that would be interesting.
Oh my God. The trouble was I was trying to go to a blueberry festival, but it was during the pandemic. So I didn't get to see the dirty underbelly of the blueberry festival. Well, I keep trying to go to the Cherry Fest. I keep trying to go to the Cherry Fest in Traverse City. And I was up at this, this is totally unrelated to blueberries because I'm on cherries now. But I went to this store called Cherry Republic, which is a big Michigan cherry store. And I'm like, hey, I can't wait to go to your Cherry Fest. When is it? Just like, yeah, you don't want to go. It's disgusting. And I go, what? So I've yet to go to the Cherry Fest. Blueberries, I don't know if I've uncovered anything. And we all know they're like very nutritious. Some people say they fight cancer. I love it that you can eat them with sugar in a baked good and still reap the health benefits. And I think that's what I'm trying to point out. So bake them into cakes and pies, sweet rolls, just eat your blueberries.
That is a wonderful way to end off this. Did everyone get a question asked of them? Yes? Okay, good. Then we did the math right. So yeah, well, that brings us to the end of the event. And I want to thank all of the authors for this wonderful discussion. Thank you to Eden University Bookstore for hosting. And thank you to our audience for joining us and sending us some amazing, incredible questions. You can purchase copies of all of these books using the links in chat or heading over to University Bookstore's website. Be sure to follow all the authors on social media and whatever else, newsletters, everything. Just sign up to everything that they're offering. And thank you for everyone for spending this time with us. And we hope to see you again at another one of the University Bookstore events again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Grace.
Thanks for having